There's a truth that few men dare to admit. Sometimes that woman who occupies your thoughts, the one who looks at you in a different way, is already committed. But what happens when, despite everything, the signs start to appear? A glance that lingers a second longer than usual, a smile that seems to say much more than words allow. And you wonder, is it possible that she's into you, even though she's in another relationship? Today, we're going to decipher those signals that, even though she tries to hide them, her heart can't conceal. If this is your first time here, I'm Celia, and welcome. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. What we're going to explore today won't just open your eyes. It will make you see relationships in a way you never imagined. So get ready, because this won't be just a simple chat. It will be a journey of personal discovery that can improve your intimate and emotional life. Let's begin. Number 1. The fear of being discovered. The forbidden, that taste that, even though we know we shouldn't have it, draws us in like nothing else in the world. Desire has a mysterious power, but when the forbidden comes into play, it becomes irresistible. Now imagine a committed woman who feels that tingle on her skin every time she's near someone who isn't her partner. And not just anyone, her husband's friend. That's the situation my friend Martha found herself in, and I assure you, it was an emotional roller coaster she still remembers with a nervous smile today. Martha had been married for years, in a calm, comfortable relationship. But as she often told me, something was missing. Her husband had a close friend, Andrew, a charming guy, always attentive, with that mix of confidence and playfulness that can make any woman let her guard down without even realizing it. And well, Martha realized it too late. It all started innocently, as these things often do. A few jokes between them at gatherings, a conversation that lasted longer than usual in the kitchen during a dinner party, things her husband didn't even notice. But Martha did. Oh yes, she did. Andrew looked at her in a different way, and although she tried to control herself, she felt something awaken inside her every time he spoke to her. But then, when that subtle flirting started to become something more evident, the inevitable happened. Fear. And not just any fear. Fear that paralyzes you. The fear of being discovered. Martha confessed to me that when she first felt that spark, all she could think was, I can't let this happen. But desire has its own plans. The more she tried to avoid Andrew, the more she thought about him. There's your clear sign. When a committed woman starts feeling something for another man, especially for someone forbidden, the first thing she'll do is pull away. Not because she doesn't want to be near him, but because the risk is too high. Martha stopped joking with Andrew, distanced herself when he entered the room, and avoided any eye contact that might reveal what was really going on in her head. But what her husband didn't know, nor anyone else, was that inside, she was a mess. Every time Andrew walked through the door, her heart skipped a beat, and that fear of someone noticing only fueled her forbidden desire even more. The psychology of this is fascinating. Experts say that the fear of being discovered in a situation like this is what creates even more emotional tension. It's as if the brain, instead of running away, is drawn to the danger. Because the forbidden has that effect, it makes something that's already attractive become irresistible. So if you ever notice that the woman who looked at you with interest suddenly starts pulling away, avoiding you, or acting cold for no apparent reason, don't take it as rejection. The fear of being discovered is so powerful that it can push her to distance herself. But here's the curious part. When a woman works so hard to stay away from you, it's when she has you most on her mind. Martha tried to avoid it, of course she did. How could she not? Andrew was her husband's best friend. There was too much at stake. But as she later told me with a laugh, the more she avoided him, the more she desired him. Because every time she saw him, she felt that dangerous mix of attraction and adrenaline. She knew she shouldn't, but the temptation was always there, constantly teasing her. And here's a piece of advice for you. If you're in a situation like this, don't rush things. Let it flow. When fear comes into play, it's best to give it space, because if she's truly interested, that fear of being discovered won't last forever. Desire, by its very nature, will find a way to surface sooner or later. And if you're patient, you'll see how curiosity overcomes fear. In the end, Martha decided not to cross that line. But every time Andrew left, the spark he lit inside her took days to fade away. Fear kept her safe, but the desire, that's the lasting memory that still makes her smile with that mischievous look of someone who almost tasted the forbidden. So the next time you notice she's pulling away, acting differently, remember this: fear isn't a no. It's just a sign that what she feels goes beyond what she expected. And the forbidden, my friend, always has that magic of drawing you in, precisely because we know we shouldn't have it. Number 2, the look that breaks barriers. The look. That look that says everything when words fall short. Did you know that eyes can betray even the most reserved person? If you've ever felt that she's looking at you in a different way, I assure you, it's no coincidence. When a committed woman feels attracted to someone who isn't her partner, it's often in those small moments, through eye contact, that her true emotions surface. And what's behind that look is more than you might imagine. Let me tell you something that happened to me years ago. I worked in an office where there was a colleague, let's call him James, who was quite clueless when it came to attraction. One day, a co-worker of his, Rachel, started looking at him differently. The spark in her eyes every time he said something, that slight pause before looking away, as if she were trying not to reveal too much. I could see it all clearly, like reading an open book. But James, poor guy, didn't notice. Rachel was committed, yes, but there was a connection her eyes couldn't hide. And this is where the psychology of eye contact comes in. Experts have studied this for years, and it's fascinating how the human brain responds to prolonged eye contact. When someone looks at you directly with a certain intensity, there's an emotional activation. They're not just seeing you, they're feeling you. And in the case of a woman who's committed but feels attracted to someone else, it's a sign that her heart and mind are in conflict. If you've noticed that this woman looks at you more than usual, that her eyes seem to linger a second longer than necessary on yours, pay attention. It's very likely that she's trying to control her emotions, but the body, my friend, has its own language, and it's hard to hide. The gaze becomes a kind of escape, a way to express what words can't. Now you might wonder, how can you tell if this look is more than just courtesy or friendliness? Here's a simple but effective tip. Observe how she reacts when your eyes meet. If she holds the gaze, then looks away with a soft smile, there's a clue. If this happens multiple times, if you find yourself catching her eyes more often than expected, well, let's just say fate might be playing a little game with both of you. But be careful, because a look alone isn't enough. I don't want you to misinterpret every glance as an undeniable sign of interest. Sometimes people are just being friendly, but if you notice consistency, if that intensity in her eyes persists at different moments, it's very likely that there's something more. And here's the most intriguing part. What do you do with that information? My advice is to take it slow. Don't rush things. Observe with patience. As my grandmother used to say, eyes don't lie, but the heart needs time to clear things up. Rachel may not have ended up with James, but I assure you, that look made him realize something that, until that moment, he hadn't been able to see, that interest isn't always something we can control, and that sometimes the most subtle signals are the most revealing. So, my friend, the next time you catch that look that seems to cut through the air, remember, the eyes are the window to the soul, and sometimes that window opens a little more than one intends to show. And if you know how to see it, you can discover much more than words will ever tell you. Number 3, the game of unspoken words. Let's talk about the power of unspoken words, those that hide between the lines, disguised as innocent comments. But if you know how to read them, they can open up a world of secret complicity. Sometimes, a committed woman can't afford to be direct. And this is where the game of subtlety comes into play. Because, my friend, when a woman wants to say something she can't openly express, she'll do it masterfully, wrapping her true feelings in jokes, in casual little phrases that, if you're not paying attention, might seem innocent, but they're not. Let me explain. Communication happens on many levels, and one of the most fascinating is subtext. In the psychology of communication, there's much talk about how people, especially when they're in complicated situations, use coded language. Maybe it's already happened to you, a conversation that seems trivial about the weather or work. But deep down, you feel there's something more to what she's saying. That something more is the sign you need to catch. A while ago, I read a study that talked about how women in situations of forbidden attraction often play with words in a very particular way. They use double meanings, light jokes, or even an excess of formality as a way to protect themselves, while also keeping that subtle flirting alive. And to be honest, this isn't new. This type of communication has always existed, especially in contexts where feelings or desires couldn't be spoken about openly. A friend of mine, Lucy, used to tell me that when she was in a complicated situation with someone, the most fun part was maintaining that tension through words. "It's like dancing on the edge of a knife," she would say. "You never really say what you want to say, but you make sure the other person understands. And if he didn't get it, well, then he wasn't ready to play that game." A classic example is when she asks you about something seemingly insignificant, but does it with a different tone, one she wouldn't use with anyone else. Maybe she throws in a joke that seems like a trivial comment, but the subtext is there. She's establishing an intimate connection with you while keeping up appearances for everyone else. Other times, she might say something with a touch of exaggeration, as if testing you to see if you also get what she's not saying. Now, pay attention to this detail. If her jokes with you seem to have an extra layer, a level of complicity that she doesn't have with others, you're facing an important sign. Often, these subtle interactions are a way of maintaining that bond without crossing obvious boundaries. The key is in the tone of voice, the little pauses, and how her energy changes when she's talking to you compared to others. But not everything is that simple. Sometimes, excessive formality is also a sign. Yes, you heard that right. When a committed woman starts to feel something for someone else, she might become stiff, almost distant, in her words. Why? Because she knows that one word too many could give her away, and she'd rather keep a shield of distance than risk everything coming to light. This is where subtleties are key. If you notice that, all of a sudden, she's more serious with you when she used to be relaxed. She might be trying to set up barriers, yet can't help that little spark in her eyes when she looks at you. So, what do you do then? Well, this is where your observation skills come into play. Listen carefully, not just to the words, but to what's behind them. Flirting in these situations is like a game of chess, where every move is calculated, and if you can read the moves, you can anticipate what comes next. Try this exercise next time you talk to her. Pay attention to those little pauses between what she says. Notice if her tone subtly changes, or if her jokes seem loaded with deeper meaning. The game of unspoken words is one of the most effective ways to maintain a connection without risking too much. And if you can catch that subtext, you'll have deciphered one of the clearest signs that she's into you, even if she can't say it openly. So, remember, in situations like these, words always carry more weight than they seem. Don't stay on the surface. Sometimes the most trivial conversations hide the deepest desires. And if you pay attention, you'll be able to read those signals she works so hard to keep hidden between the lines. If you're enjoying the video so far and feel like you're discovering those signals you hadn't noticed before in a committed woman, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to support this content. Stay with me until the end, because the most revealing part is yet to come. For those who are truly committed to understanding what's behind those gestures and looks, I have a final reflection that could completely change the way you see these situations. And tell me, where are you listening from? I'd love to know. Let's continue. Number 4, the details that aren't coincidental. Now we're going to delve into a more subtle area, the small details. Those gestures that, at first glance, seem like insignificant things, but when you look closely, carry much more weight than you think. Because when a committed woman feels attracted to someone who isn't her partner, she doesn't always express it with words or grand actions. No, she hides behind the everyday, in the details that only someone observant would notice. Imagine this: you're at a meeting, maybe at a cafe or at work, and suddenly she mentions something you said weeks ago, something you had completely forgotten, but she hasn't. Why? Because when someone matters to us, when we're attracted, we tend to remember the smallest things. It's as if the brain decides to file those moments in a special folder and bring them out at just the right time to create a connection that can't be ignored. In psychology, this is called selective memory. It's not a trick or something she does on purpose. It's simply her mind working in the background, giving value to everything that comes from you. And that, my friend, is a clear sign. Not everyone remembers what you said in a casual conversation, but when a committed woman is into you, her attention is focused on you in a deeper way, even if she tries to hide it. And then there are those accidents that, if you're observant, you'll realize aren't so accidental. A text message sent by mistake, or maybe an excuse to ask you something completely irrelevant just to start a conversation. Come on, we all know how easy it is to delete a message before sending it, so when this happens, you can bet there's a much more intentional reason behind it. What's interesting about all this is that it's not always about grand gestures or obvious flirting. Often it's in those small moments where she reveals herself. Maybe she does something as simple as bringing you a coffee without you asking for it, or sharing a song with you that reminds her of a conversation you had. Small gestures, yes, but loaded with an intention that you can't ignore. It's her way of telling you that, even though she's committed, she thinks about you more than she admits. A classic experiment on social behavior revealed something very interesting. When someone feels attraction, even if they don't want to express it openly, they start making small concessions, offering acts of service that seem minimal, but are actually their way of getting closer. The famous psychologist John Gottman talked about this in his studies on relationships. He said that bids in a relationship, small gestures of attention or consideration, are a way to strengthen emotional connection. In the case of a committed woman, those gestures aren't directed at her partner, they're aimed at you. And even though, on the surface, it may seem casual, it's not. Now, this is where you need to be very careful, because if you're not paying attention, you might overlook these signs and think they're just acts of kindness. But when a woman goes beyond what she would normally do, when she puts in that extra effort in the little details, that's where the real message lies. She doesn't need to say it out loud. Those small acts are her quiet way of showing you how she feels. And what should you do? First, you need to be aware of these details. Sometimes, what seems insignificant is where the real interest is hiding. It's not always about grand declarations or romantic gestures. In situations like this, the forbidden slips through the small cracks of the everyday. So the next time you notice that she remembers things you had forgotten, or that she seems to have you in mind in ways others don't, you already know what's happening. The small details are never just that. They are her way of connecting with you without breaking the explicit rules, maintaining the appearance of normality while, beneath the surface, emotions flow with an intensity that only the observant can perceive. Remember, in the simplest gestures, the deepest emotions can be found. And if you pay attention, you'll realize that those details aren't coincidence, but a reflection of something she's trying to keep hidden. Number 5, subtle physical contact. Now let's talk about something that, while it may seem insignificant, could be the most powerful sign of all: subtle physical contact. And no, I'm not referring to a strong hug or a stolen kiss. I'm talking about those small, almost invisible touches that sometimes happen without anyone else noticing, except you. Because when a committed woman feels a physical attraction towards someone, her body becomes an ally, even when her mind tries to control it. Have you ever felt, in the middle of a conversation, her hand casually brushing against yours? Or maybe, as she passes by, her fingers lightly graze your arm? It might seem like an accident, something unintentional, but trust me, Those little gestures have a purpose. Touch, no matter how slight, awakens emotions far beyond what words can express. And for a woman who can't openly show her interest, physical contact is her way of creating a more intimate connection without saying a single word. This is where the neuroscience of touch comes into play. Numerous studies have shown that physical contact generates an immediate response in the brain, releasing oxytocin, the famous love hormone. Even if the touch is brief, the effect can be profound. The body has its own language, and when a committed woman feels that attraction to someone else, she may not always be able to control the urge to get closer, even in a subtle way. Think about it. You're in a conversation, everything seems normal, but suddenly you notice her fingers have lightly touched yours while handing you a glass or reaching for something on the table. Maybe she doesn't do it in an obvious way, but the intention is there, in that second of contact that seems to last just a moment longer than necessary. And if you're paying attention, you'll realize it's not the first time it's happened. Physical contact, even if minimal, is one of the oldest ways to generate emotional connection, and in these kinds of situations, one of the most powerful. Sometimes, a committed woman can't express what she feels in words, but her body speaks for her. And these small touches, which seem harmless, are her way of crossing that line without anyone else noticing. There's something almost addictive about those moments, isn't there? The feeling that a touch, no matter how small, carries a much bigger message. It's her way of letting you know that, even though she can't say it out loud, she's thinking about you, that she desires you, even if she won't openly admit it. It's a constant push and pull between what she's allowed to show and what's truly happening inside her. In forbidden situations, physical contact becomes a dangerous and exciting playground. Did you know that when we touch someone, even subtly, the brain can interpret that gesture as an act of intimacy? A touch on the arm, a hand gently resting on your back as you walk together, these moments leave an emotional imprint. And here's a thought. If you notice those touches happening more frequently than would be considered normal, if there's a pattern in how her hands or body seek contact with you, even in an apparently casual way, you're dealing with a strong signal. Because the body can't lie. It may try to hide what it feels, it may try to maintain appearances, but touch has a way of betraying even the most reserved woman. The best part is that these gestures aren't something you can force. They naturally occur when there's real attraction. She's not going to throw herself at you, no. It's more subtle than that. It's the light touch on your arm as she laughs at something you said, or how her leg brushes against yours under the table. Things that others might overlook, but that you, if you're paying attention, will know to interpret for what they really are. Signals that the desire is there, quietly waiting. And the challenge lies in how you respond. Because if you decide to return that touch, even lightly, you're acknowledging that silent connection. It's a balancing act, where physical contact becomes a wordless conversation between the two of you. So the next time you feel that seemingly casual touch, remember, there's nothing casual about it. The body is wiser than we think, and when a committed woman starts crossing that physical barrier, even in subtle ways, she's telling you far more than words ever could. In these cases, what's forbidden hides in those fleeting touches that, while brief, can leave a much deeper mark than you might imagine. At the end of the day, the forbidden always carries that irresistible allure, but it also comes with a responsibility we can't ignore. The signals a committed woman sends you, those intense glances, the subtle touches, the disguised jokes, are small flashes of a desire that can't always be openly expressed. But in that game of looks and unspoken words, there's also fear, doubt, and the tension of crossing a line that could change everything. The most important thing to remember is that what you discover in these signals doesn't just affect you, it affects her too. Relationships, even those tinted with temptation, should be handled with care and respect. Because, in the end, what we value most is how we navigate those complicated emotions that arise when the forbidden knocks at our door. Every gesture, every word, carries a hidden story, and it's your responsibility to read those signals with wisdom. And this is where I want you to find space for reflection. The key isn't just in recognizing the signals, but in knowing what to do with them. Is it just the allure of what you can't have, or is there something deeper behind it? Because true maturity lies in knowing when to follow an impulse and when to simply observe and respect boundaries. My name is Celia, and I want this to be a home of wisdom where we can discuss these important topics, openly, but always with respect. Here, we go beyond the surface to explore the subtleties of life that can't always be spoken out loud. Together, I want us to find ways to improve our quality of life, not just in the intimate aspects, but in everything we do. Because, in the end, every small change we make in ourselves, every act of understanding, every reflection on our relationships reflects in our happiness and well-being. If this is your first time on the channel, I invite you to subscribe and activate the notification bell. You won't want to miss the upcoming topics, because I promise not only to surprise you, but to help you better understand those complex emotions that make us human. And if you've made it this far, it's because you're committed to your own growth, and that's something I want to acknowledge. So, to know who truly connected with this message until the end, comment with the phrase, "I love wisdom," and tell me where you're listening from. I want to know who's sharing this journey with me. And don't leave without sharing this video with someone who might need to understand these signals today. Sometimes a small gesture, a reflection, can make a big difference in someone's life. See you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring those secrets that, once uncovered, can transform your life.